Lost metaphor, back for more to kick the raw, represent everyone's you and I verse. We're gonna go ahead and listen to the newest single I'm gonna drop. It's called Cosmos off the new album, and it's produced by Shadow. Wake up in the morning, pockets on E. Yeah, you know, living this life ain't free. Gotta get a dollar shown, freedom ain't free. Wake up in the morning, pockets on E. Yeah, you know, living this life ain't free. Gotta get a dollar shown, freedom ain't free. Freedom again, drop science like Orion, flex on. Still savages, just don't see the blood stacked up. Didn't wanna make a deep pressing one, but the truth is more than pleasure. Now think about Lil Wilbur, just a fellow organism. I thought we all equal. Don't step on ants, don't step on plants. I'll support our breath. Look, we cutting trees down. Do you even care? We kill everything on earth now. King of the jungle, no I don't mumble. Constant, conscious, so reckless. Enter this game to change it. Rock pose of earth with my statements. I teach a master rhyme, and we're the rest of bottom. Wake up in the morning, pockets on E. Yeah, you know, living this life ain't free. Gotta get a dollar shown, freedom ain't an AK soon, bigger than J. All on me, 808 feet, salivating. Shooting shows, worthy lows. A Nubian, descended from the cosmos. Descended from the cosmos. From the cosmos. Like I say, this is Cosmos off the newest album. And it's a single. With this being said, I'm gonna drop the music video here soon, probably within this next week and things of that nature. So y'all go ahead and check that out and things like that whenever I drop that. So yeah, with this being said, we also have the moon in Sagittarius, right? It's a waxing moon. So we're just having our final moon phase before the full moon, right? And with this being said, it's the morality of a vibration. And with this being said, Sagittarius is also expansion. So we're expanding the vibration and things like that. So with this being said, we also have the moon sextile in Pluto, right? With the moon sextile in Pluto, it's going to be seeing the opportunity to have change or enact a deep change. And with it also sextiling Lilith, right, is seeing the opportunity to have our darkest moment be enacted and things like that, and relating to our darkest moment and being able to expand emotionally and things like that. And with this being said, you essentially have to get to feeling comfortable expanding oneself. And with this expansion, you're also going to see the opportunities within the relationship and what you're relating with. So we also have the moon squaring Saturn and Neptune, right? Based on Saturn being in Pisces and Neptune also being in Pisces. So we're going to be learning to expand based on our restrictions and our dreams and illusions and nightmares. In this expansion, we're going to have to learn to be more emotional and be able to be more adaptive based on the way that we're emotionalizing this expansion, right? Or this morality of our feelings and things like that. So essentially what I'm getting at with that is, if you're not in a circumstance or situation where you're actually open to learning how to actually achieve your dreams and things like that, it's going to be a more difficult kind of space for you. And keep in mind, if you're a Gemini moon, or if you're a Virgo moon, and like I say, or if you have any Virgo or Gemini placements, this is going to be a more difficult time for you based on the moon opposing oneself. And keep in mind, when you have these mutable alignments, it's in a circumstance situation where you're more adaptive to your own way based on your element. So essentially, you want to be in the element of fire and things like that. So with this being said, we also have the moon trining Mercury and Venus, and also the North Node and Chiron. So based on this trine between Mercury and Venus, and also North Node and Chiron, and the moon, we have this grand trine. So essentially we have a grand trine, which means that we're in a circumstance, a situation where we're expanding, and based on our emotions, we're having this expansion based on our ways of thinking, communicating about oneself, being Mercury, and also Venus valuing our own way of being stubborn or consistent, essentially, or like kind of being in that narcissistic vibration. Keep in mind, it's like Leo is looked at either the narcissist or the individual that is so consistent upon their vision that they are kind of like the campfire that everybody wants to gather around, so to speak. And like I say, it's a grand trine with it all being in fire, right? So essentially, fire represents visions. So essentially, we're going to have the visions based on our emotions, our thoughts, our value system, and also with the North Node and Chiron both being in Aries, right? The North Node is our purpose or our like most an uncomfortable moment that we actually want to be able to achieve, so to speak. So it's like uncomfortability creates growth essentially. And based on being that individual with Aries being here, we're also going to have this Chiron energy, right? And Chiron represents the circumstance situation of a wounded healer. So essentially, our individuality is something that we want to continue to be in, but it's also, we've realized that being this individual, we're going to be criticized and things like that, and we're also going to be wounded. And based on being the wounded healer, you have more knowledge and wisdom based on you being in a circumstance that you've been through the trials and tribulations, so to speak. So we're going to have a gift to have our visions become more to life and things like that, based on, like I say, the grand trine. And then moving forward, we also have the moon in conjuncting, which is a 150-degree angle or a misunderstanding to the sun, also Mars and Uranus, right? So based on it being in conjunction to the sun, we may misunderstand our morality based on us being in a comfortable action. So essentially, you don't want to be so morality based to the point that you actually don't want to take action upon your circumstance. And then also with Mars being in a conjunction, we may misunderstand us wanting to adapt to our vision and things of that nature. But based on us wanting to feeling comfortable adapting to the vision, we may misunderstand that we actually have to take the time to be more logistical and practical on our intentions and our passions and things like that, based on Mars being in a space that it actually doesn't do too well. So Mars is at home being in Scorpio and also Aries. So with this being said, you may misunderstand that your own way of feeling comfortable and things like that with your morality may be a misunderstanding because it's in that circumstance situation where Mars is more practical at this point in time. You want to utilize the practicality energy and take your time to have your passions being enacted. And then with also it being Uranus being here, right? And Mars and Uranus both being in Taurus, we're going to misunderstand these emotions of our rebellious nature and things like that, and stabilizing our rebellion and things like that. So keep in mind that to have a rebellion be enacted, you have to have something to rebel and oppose against. So with this being said, we may feel comfortable being in our own expansion, our own morality, but we may not realize that we're actually not being an individual. We're not actually able to stabilize this morality, so to speak. And last but not least, we have the moon opposing Jupiter, right? So the moon opposing Jupiter is this knowledge, wisdom, and experience, right? And it based on Jupiter being at home in Sagittarius, right? And it actually being in Gemini at this point in time, we may be in a circumstance situation where we feel comfortable being more wise or in our own morality and feeling comfortable with our morality. We may not actually be able to communicate that morality based on us thinking we're too wise for our own good. So like being too intelligent for your own good at this point in time is actually a circumstance situation that you either want to add on or oppose to. So keep in mind that like the puzzle piece that you need to find based on Jupiter being in Gemini, that's how I like to break down Jupiter and Gemini. It's like you're trying to find the right puzzle piece that actually works for this actual circumstance situation to expand, so to speak. So you may be feeling comfortable with your own morality to a point where you don't actually want to try new things, so to speak. So with this being said, that's kind of a funny question. An individual asks, you have a square circle. So you think about, this is a left field thing, but I'm going to go into it. That's actually what astrology is all about. You know what I'm saying? You want to figure out these alignments to the actual circle that we're in, so to speak, or the circumstance. So squaring out the circle is actually a real thing. You know what I'm saying? That's actually a circumstance situation that you want to learn how to do. I know dude is making a joke, but at the end of the day, you should be able to square out the circle, and that's like how you know you've really truly found your own circumstance situation, and you found your own correct alignment, so to speak, to oneself. So to get into what I get across is that like it's a real thing, like people having a bucket chart, so to speak, or like the actual way that the planets align, so to speak. And that's like kind of called a bucket. So like think about like you have one planet all the way at the top of the chart, and all the rest of your planets are at the bottom of your chart, right, or below the horizon. If you have one planet above the horizon and the rest of them below the horizon, that's called a bucket. And like with this being said, that one planet all weighs on the rest of your chart, so to speak, and kind of like allows you to figure out, okay, based on how I'm interacting with this one atmosphere is actually either adding on or like I'm saying, making it more difficult for my actual circumstance with the other planets. For example, I actually have a bucket kind of, for example, like my moon is all the way at the top of my chart in my 11th house, and the rest of my planets are more below the horizon. So essentially, based on my emotions with the moon in Gemini in the 11th house and my and how I feel comfortable with my associates or uncomfortable with my associates kind of depends on what actually kind of play what's like and actually be interacted. So essentially, if I'm in a better emotional state, then I actually have more it's like a you're in a state that you can actually interact better with the rest of your planets and be in a more comprehensive state. So that's just one example. And for example, the shape of your chart is a real thing. So that's like kind of squaring out the circle, so to speak. But yeah, going into the rising signs and breaking down each rising sign, keep in mind that we're going to have Sagittarius being in the first house. So if you're a Sagittarius rising, you're dealing with your personal affairs or your personal morality at this point in time. And essentially, do you feel comfortable with your personal affairs or your individuality at this point in time on the higher octave, or you're feeling uncomfortable with your personal affairs and your individuality at this point in time? So essentially, the morality that you've been utilizing throughout the rest of the alignment, so to speak, whenever you had the moon of Scorpio and whatever you transformed at that point in time, did it actually benefit you to a point where you can now feel comfortable with your personal life? And that's essentially what you have accumulated, and now you're in that first impression of oneself. And do you feel comfortable with that first impression that you're giving off to even oneself and also others at this point in time? So if you're on the lower octave and you feel kind of uncomfortable with your personal affairs and things like that, this is kind of your last chance to rectify things before you have things be fully accumulated with the Capricorn moon, with the full moon in Capricorn, right? So then keep in mind, we also have Scorpio rising, right? Scorpio rising is going to have the Sagittarius in the second house, right? And one thing I forgot to break down in my Scorpio moon video is that it also is what I'm saying would be squaring Mercury and Venus as well. So essentially, whenever we had the moon of Scorpio, we also had to learn how to communicate about our in-depth emotions and things like that, and the values of our own visions and things like that, based on them both being in Leo. So essentially, we were thinking and valuing about our vision that we had going on, and do we actually learn from the transformation that we actually feel comfortable with at that point in time? So yeah, getting back to the rising signs, Scorpio rising would then, like I say, have Sagittarius in the second house. And Sagittarius in the second house is all about the values of your own morality and values of your expansion. So essentially, the people, places, and things that you're around, do you actually value their wisdom? Do you value their way of expanding or your own morality when you're in those spaces and things like that? So essentially, do these people uplift you, so to speak, is kind of what I'm getting at. Like, do they actually bring you in a space that you feel on a high, so to speak? Keep in mind, Sagittarius is like the high highs and the low lows. So essentially, the Sagittarius either feels real good about themselves or they feel real bad about themselves. So at this point in time, you either feel real comfortable with what you value or you feel very uncomfortable with what you're valuing person, place, and thing wise and things like that. So essentially, this is like I say, the last chance before we have that full moon in Capricorn. And with the full moon in Capricorn, it'll be having a full accumulation of our status, our blueprint, and things like that. So essentially, at this point in time, you want to find the right thing to value to then be in your environment and actually feel comfortable in that environment whenever we have that full moon in Capricorn, being that Scorpio rising, right? And that's the higher octave. You feel comfortable with what you value, or you feel uncomfortable with what you value. And the lower octave, if, like I say, if you're on that lower octave, you want to find something that you can actually value and uplift oneself at this point in time, or even make money off of it, so to speak, because Scorpio is that shared value. So essentially, are you in a space that you're making enough money that you can actually feel a bit uplifted and you can utilize that money for the right circumstance situation for you to actually benefit oneself, so to speak. I don't know about y'all, but I'm gonna go ahead and give Coke the little promotion at this point in time. But I believe in wiping off the can every time, because I don't know, you know what I'm saying? They'd be in the factory and they'd be doing all kind of things in the factory. You have no idea how long that joint been sitting there. Go ahead, wipe that joint off. You feel me? Very left field, but that's why I do that. You know what I'm saying? Moving forward, having the Libra rising is going to have the third house. The Libra rising is going to have the third house being in Sagittarius. And the third house is all about your environment or your immediate spaces and things like that, or your immediate environment. So Libra is going to see the opportunity in their environment and see what they can actually be uplifted by in their environment, so to speak. So essentially, are you around people that are too wise for their own good? Or are you around people that can actually uplift you and be in a space of this morality being beneficial, so to speak? So Libra is seeing the opportunity to either be uplifted by their own morality or be in a space that, you know what I'm saying, they're in a space that their morality is actually non-beneficial, and they're now seeing the opportunity that is non-beneficial. And keep in mind, just because it's a sextile doesn't mean it's always a good thing, so to speak. So based on how you're interacting with your environment, things like that, you may see the opportunity that the people around you can actually communicate with, and you can actually bring a wise circumstance situation out of that, and you can't actually extract any wisdom out of that, the circumstance situation. That'd be on that lower octave. But if, like I say, if you're on the higher octave, being that Libra rising at this point in time, you're around individuals that you can actually gain more wisdom from, and you can see the opportunities from just interacting with these people in your actual spaces, so to speak. And keep in mind, the third house could also be like your neighborhood, so to speak. So are you in a neighborhood that actually benefits you at this point in time, and you can see opportunities with interacting with these people in this environment and see how it's going to benefit you, so to speak. So, like, for example, like if the Libra is always the essentially, well, not always, but essentially the Libra archetype is the artist, so to speak. So is your environment, is your neighborhood, and pardon me, are there people in your environment or your neighborhood that can actually have you derive this artistry, so to speak, or be able to accomplish being an artist? So, like, do you have producers in your environment? Is your next door neighbor a composer? Do they help you write lyrics, so to speak? Or do you have any fellow artists in your environment, so to speak, at this point in time? And then you can actually gain wisdom from these people being producers or engineers, so to speak, and learn how to be, see opportunities on how to be more wise about how you go about your music and communicating, essentially. Because keep in mind, the third house is communication. Moving forward, the Virgo rising is having the fourth house being a Sagittarius, so it's a square. So the Virgo has to learn to be more expansive and also learn to utilize the correct morality in their home, in their own privacy. So essentially, this point in time, being a Virgo rising, you don't want to be so critical. You want to be in a space that you can actually help others expand and things like that, and learn how to be less critical, but also see the visions within others and how to be more essentially caring about your home and things of that nature. So you don't actually want to be in a space that you want to boss everybody around, but you want to be in a space that you're kind of more allowing others to expand, so to speak, and you're able to give your actual knowledge, wisdom, and experience in the own details that you've been working with and things like that, and see, like, okay, if you learn from this routine and pattern that you've utilized in the past, now you can actually make people feel more comfortable because you're in a space that you can actually give them this wisdom and knowledge, essentially. And keep in mind, like I say, Virgo is the routine and pattern and the critique sign. So essentially, you want to utilize this earth energy to be more practical, to see the vision within your home on how to make people be more expansive, so to speak, or be in more of a better morality, so to speak. And you may also be in a space that you want to learn more about your home and how to be more in your heart space, so to speak, at this point in time. So it's like there kind of is no higher and lower octave when you're dealing with the square. The square is just pressure, you know what I'm saying? So it's that 90-degree angle. So you have to learn from your circumstance situation that you're dealing with. And keep in mind, Sagittarius feels comfortable being expansive and being free at this point in time. So you want to learn how to allow people to be more free based on their emotional state and things like that. Then moving forward, the Leo rising is having the fifth house being a Sagittarius. So at this point in time, the advice I'd give the Leo is go ahead and expand and express yourself and be in a space that you can actually go have fun, so to speak. And if you're in that higher octave, you feel comfortable expressing yourself being that Leo rising. Or if you're in the lower octave, you feel uncomfortable expressing yourself and you're like, oh, dag, I kind of want to utilize my morality to be more hard and things like that. And I don't feel so free to express myself because it actually makes me feel like I'm in a cage, so to speak. So essentially, if you're on the higher octave, you feel that you broke out of the cage and you're actually feeling comfortable expressing yourself or traveling wherever you want and achieving whatever goal that you have in mind and things like that. And like I say, keep in mind that this is your last chance before we have the full moon in Capricorn. So essentially, this status that you're expressing at this point in time and feeling comfortable expressing, is it actually something that you want to see being your status and have be played out as your actual routine and pattern that you're going to continue with for these next 2 weeks? Or are you going to have to actually shed certain things to now feel comfortable expressing yourself? You know what I'm saying? Whenever we have the Sagittarius moon come back around, whenever we have the Leo season, so to speak. And you're going to have the sun in your first house, and it'll be like, dag, like I'm taking action in my individuality, but you know what I'm saying, you wouldn't actually feel comfortable in that individuality based on you not expressing what you really wanted to get across. Sometimes Leo has to just let it all loose, you know what I'm saying, and just go ahead and feel free. So if you're not allowing yourself to feel free at this point in time, it's kind of a non-beneficial thing. And that's kind of on the lower octave. And like I said, if you're on the higher octave, you feel comfortable expressing yourself. And moving forward, the Cancer rising is having an inconjunction or a misunderstanding to the Sagittarius energy, because the Cancer is more a cardinal energy and they want to initiate and create an emotion. So essentially, this personal emotion that you got going on, you actually feel in this comfortability being in this routine and pattern, expressed in this circumstance situation, or in this morality, so to speak, or you feel uncomfortable in this morality and being in this work routine and pattern of this circumstance situation. So like, another way to put it is, like I say, Sagittarius is that freedom energy, and on the lower octave, it's like being in that cage to a point where you feel uncomfortable being in your expression, so to speak, or expressing your freedom and your morality of that freedom, right? So essentially, the Cancer has to see that they may be in a misunderstanding based on them wanting to feel comfortable in their personal life and things like that. And sometimes you might have to be in an uncomfortable space to actually expand, so to speak. So you might have to get out of your own kind of crabby nature and stop being such a crybaby, you know what I'm saying? And things like that to actually expand oneself and now feel comfortable in that routine and pattern that you're expanding into. And like I say, keep in mind, this is your last opportunity before the full moon in Capricorn, right? So essentially, the Cancer has to see, okay, what is something that I actually want to work on to then have a more beneficial relationship or relation with others and things like that. And is this actually a healthy thing that I can expand upon and things like that? Is this a healthy morality to be in? And moving forward, the Gemini rising is having the seventh house being Sagittarius, and the seventh house is all about relationships or relations, right? So keep in mind, you can either add on or oppose in the seventh house, being at a 180-degree angle. So essentially, Gemini is seeing this communication style that they're personally involved in. Is it actually beneficial to a point where they feel comfortable relating or adding on? So essentially, does your relationship make you feel free to a point that you can express oneself and you feel comfortable just go ahead and speak your mind, so to speak? And if you feel uncomfortable expressing yourself and speaking your mind at this point in time, you're in that cage and things like that where you don't actually want to express yourself because you think, okay, I have a logistical and practical way about how I have to manipulate the circumstance to actually be in a comfortable space, and so to speak. So essentially, if you're on that lower octave, you're in a space where you're putting yourself in a cage based on you thinking, okay, me just communicating what I have in my mind is actually going to be non-beneficial because later on, these people are going to hold it against me and things like that. So essentially, you want to see what relationship you can actually add on to make yourself feel free and have the vision of that freedom, so to speak. Shout out to Mariah Carey. She was an Aries, but she got that song Vision of Love, you know what I'm saying? So if you got that vision, you know what I'm saying, Sagittarius, and being able to adapt to that vision of love that you got in your mind and things like that, then you're in that beneficial space, being that Gemini rising. Is like whatever thought comes to your mind, you feel comfortable in expressing that and things like that. So then moving forward, the Taurus rising is having the 8th house being a Sagittarius. And keep in mind, this is the other side of the opposition, so it's also an in conjunction, unlike to the Cancer, right? And with this being said, the 8th house is all about transformation, behind the scenes, secrets, and the rebirth. So essentially, the Taurus may be in such a fixed space to the point that they misunderstand that them expressing themselves and them actually being free and being free within what they have going on behind the scenes and rebirthing oneself, and to actually get to that space that you don't actually have to be so consistent. You can kind of allow yourself to be more free behind the scenes in those secrets and things like that. And you feel comfortable with those secrets to a point that you can actually rebirth oneself behind the scenes. And then you have now this new knowledge and wisdom whenever you have this full moon in Capricorn, and you're in a space that, okay, this morality that I went about and things like that, whenever I was transforming with the Sagittarius energy, my 8th house, that it actually is now this rebirth in that phoenix. And I see, okay, this is a status that I actually feel comfortable being in the morality of and things like that. And having, it's like actually a wise kind of circumstance that I was in, things like that. And yeah, it's kind of funny. Dude mentioned earlier, individuals being delusional, you know what I'm saying? And shoot, at the end of the day, a dream is a delusion, you know what I'm saying? So at this point in time, keep in mind, we also have Saturn and Neptune being in Pisces, which is that delusion or things like that. So you essentially do want to be building on your delusional energy and things like that. And Pisces broke this down perfect. Like, you want to be delusional optimism to a point where, like, okay, I know what I got going on and things like that, but I may actually have this dream about what I got going on to a point where I need to be optimistic about my delusion, so to speak. So yeah, keep in mind, that is also the energy that we're working with and things like that. To a point where others are going to see, like, wow, your dream is so far out that you actually do seem delusional and things like that. So yeah, and that is like kind of the energy. So like if you're not in a space where you're not able to dream big, you're kind of just a regular individual and you're not really have anything going on in your real life. So like, if you can't dream, then I don't want you around me anyway. So like, yeah, go ahead. Just to be clear, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, moving forward, the Aries rising is having the 9th house being a Sagittarius, and the 9th house is all about knowledge, wisdom, and experience. So essentially, Aries is going to have the trine, which is the gift to be in their own morality and things like that, and feeling comfortable with their morality, and traveling, so to speak. So like, does your vision travel to a point where it can actually expand and have the fire touch everybody, so to speak? And essentially, the Aries is going to have the gift to feel comfortable with that morality, so to speak. And this is the trine for the Aries that I could see being beneficial no matter what, so to speak, because the Aries is always that individual. And then being in that individuality to a point where they actually, their negativity can actually be seen as like wise and things like that. So yeah, Aries being opposing to most things is actually kind of a beneficial thing at this point in time. They're going to have the gift based on that morality. And then Pisces rising is going to have the 10th house being a Sagittarius, and the 10th house Pisces 10th house is Sagittarius, right? And keep in mind that's another square or a 90-degree angle. So the Pisces has to learn how to be more about their status or more about their blueprint and career at this point in time. So essentially the Pisces has to learn that, okay, me being so expansive and go ahead and speaking my knowledge, wisdom, and experience and feeling comfortable with my experience and things like that, is actually going to benefit me based on me having the full moon going to occur. And this, like I said, is your last chance before the full moon occurs. So you want to go ahead and learn that your own wisdom and experience that you've experienced is actually something you should feel comfortable with. And you want to feel free within this expression and things like that. So go ahead and feel comfortable in your morality and things like that. And that's something you can learn from and see that the actual vision that you got on your mind is something that others should adapt to as well. And if they don't want to, you know what I'm saying, ride the wave, so to speak, you go ahead and ride your own wave. And essentially people are going to find that, you know what I'm saying, the Pisces was already ahead of their time and things like that. So like Pisces does things like 10 years in advance because they're already in that space of the 12th house and things like that. And being in that, like the conscious unconsciousness, so to speak. Like they be in their own little world, so to speak, and things like that. Yeah, so the Pisces rising at this point in time, you want to learn to go ahead and be in that wise space and feel comfortable with your wisdom that you're utilizing and things like that. And based on you being wise, you can go ahead and learn that bringing your visions to light, it actually is a better thing and things like that. So you don't want to share all your wisdom with people that like are going to be low hanging fruit and go ahead and take your kindness for weakness. That's kind of a circumstance where you want to utilize that 90-degree angle. Like learn that these certain like let's see, 50 Cent put this perfect. Like the people that you talk to for no reason are essentially the people that you're going to go ahead and grow into. So like you want to talk to people that can actually benefit you and benefit your status at this point in time, and see like, oh wow, like the Pisces was more more wise than I ever expected and things like that. But you know what I'm saying, based on you being more of a recluse Pisces, it could be in a circumstance situation where you're not allowing yourself to feel free. So essentially you want to learn to be more free in your expressions and feel comfortable with that freedom. Moving forward, the Aquarius rising is having the 11th house being a Sagittarius, and Aquarius is a sextile to Sagittarius. So essentially, they're seeing the opportunity to associate with this wisdom, their knowledge, and things like that, and this freedom. So what your like a public persona is that you're more of a wise individual at this point in time. You want to see who to associate with to be more wise and utilize this morality of this wisdom and things like that. Like the Aquarius is like the scientist. So like the archetype of Aquarius is the fixed air. So they're in a space where they're always communicating, but they may communicate within oneself to a point where like, oh, this person won't even comprehend where I'm coming from with this wisdom and things like that. And if I associate with this individual, then I'll be known for associating with these individuals that actually aren't wise, so to speak. So the Aquarius is seeing the opportunity before the circumstance even occurs to a point where they can see, is this a beneficial circumstance to associate with this individual? So that's what the sextile 60-degree angle is going on for the Aquarius. And essentially, you're on the higher octave if you feel comfortable associating your wisdom with these other people. If you're on the lower octave, you're in a space where these people are around you that are just pretty much stupid and things like that, and you can't actually gain any wisdom from associating with them and things like that. And last but not least, the Capricorn is having the Sagittarius in the 12th house, right? So essentially, the Capricorn is having the vision of their dreams, the visions of their illusions or their nightmares and things like that, to a point where you actually feel comfortable with your the reality of your dream and things like that. So with this being said, being on that higher octave, seeing the vision of your dream, and you actually have a dream that you actually want to accomplish, you want to pretty much go ahead and be free and go ahead and not put yourself in a cage to a point where you're saying, oh, this might be a little bit delusional, but I do want to go ahead and achieve this dream. So keep in mind, like I say earlier in the video, you having a dream is something that you should go ahead and dream big about. You know what I'm saying? You kind of want to be in that delusional space, be in that Capricorn, and see, okay, based on me filling up the cup and me seeing how my personal endeavors and things like that, whenever you have the full moon in Capricorn experienced in your first house, you're going to see, okay, how far am I away from my actual dream being accomplished in my personal life? And then essentially, based on the next 2 weeks, being the full moon cycle, you know what I'm saying, you're going to be in a space of having to shed these circumstance situations to a point where, okay, I shedded so much to a point that I can actually now achieve this dream whenever we have the Capricorn new moon be experienced 6 months from now. So essentially, these next 2 weeks, you're going to be able to see whenever the moon goes over each and aligns to each other atmosphere or planet, you know what I'm saying, how you can actually then benefit yourself over the next 6 months. So like, keep in mind, whenever we have the moon in Pisces, you'll be able to see, okay, what do I actually need to shed based on my restrictions in my environment? Because Capricorn has Pisces in the 3rd house. So Capricorn would be seeing, okay, based on my environment and things like that, is this a beneficial space to be in, so to speak? And that's kind of like how you can look at how you can utilize the moon over these next 2 weeks, just not just being a Capricorn, but being any sign, so to speak. But yeah, you go ahead and go in the description if you had any kind of questions, things like that. I got my email in the description, as well as my Cash App if you wanted to donate to the movement and things like that. Get a movement you can be in tune with, you know what I'm saying? With all this being said, whenever you email me about any kind of reading and things like that, I got a menu. So I'm saying whatever kind of reading you got, I'm saying I got a way to correspond. So yeah, much love and holla back, and peace and love if you believe in all that.